allows us to interconnect very easily with sources of knowledge, and especially new knowledge in the world. Now, this has been understood in our sciences because on the whole, most universities that teach sciences teach it now in the English medium. Okay? That's also true, I think, of many but not all management faculties. It's true of Colombo Management Faculty, no? Is it on the English medium? Yeah. But you still get a few management faculties that don't function in English. They're getting fewer, but on the whole their products are not especially helpful. Okay? Now, one of the very simple factors is that we all know that knowledge is developing all the time. Okay? And on the one hand, especially in the sciences, knowledge is the absolute must. You have to know what is going on in all the fields that Dr. Ananda just mentioned. You have to know about the new discoveries in medicine. You have to know about, obviously, the new techniques in engineering, the use of computers in design, in management, in everything. But there has been a slight sense within Sri Lanka, and it's not only in Sri Lanka, in a lot of countries, that arts knowledge doesn't need very much more. If you know what happened 100 years ago, you're okay. The geography of the world hasn't really changed. So you don't need new knowledge. The history of the world hasn't really changed. You don't need new knowledge. Okay? Now, this is absurd because as the world progresses, you begin to understand more about the past through knowledge of the future. But this was really one of the problems we faced. I mean, I had a massive battle just 10 years ago when we reintroduced English medium as an option. How many of you go to Sri Lankan national schools? You're, of course, at Leighton Park. Huh? You're at Isipatana? Yes. Do you do English medium or not? Yeah. And when we started this 10 years ago, there was a strong argument that we only do it for the science faculties. And then they said, well, what about management? And I had a massive battle to say you've got to do it for the arts as well. Because on the whole, the people in charge said, oh, arts people, they're stupid, like me. You don't really need to know too much, right? We'll concentrate on our really clever students who know science and management. And we had this big battle. And we succeeded, but then about 3 or 4 years ago, they actually stopped teaching a couple of art subjects in English. I think history has now gone back. You did history in English? Singular medium. Yeah. You see what I mean? Sorry? It should be done in English, but here are 2 boys from DS telling us they didn't do it in English. Exactly, that's what I'm saying. They sort of assume you can do it there. And of course, if you stop to think that the vast majority of our schools, you people belong to privileged schools in our rural areas, they don't teach science properly anyway. Okay? Very few schools have very good teachers in the rural areas for science or for mathematics. So those poor kids are still stuck in Sinhala or Tamil. So that idea that has, in a sense, underpinned our education also has something to do with the teachers. The teachers have continued in the same old world and haven't felt the necessity of moving on to new things. And as I said, that is not true of science and to a lesser extent of management. Now, I happen to come from the University of Sabaragamuwa, which is one of the new universities. Did have a very interesting career. When I started as an assistant lecturer, I started at Peradeniya, and each time my position went up, my university went down. Right? So, I was assistant lecturer at Peradeniya, which is supposed to be the best university. It's probably not true now, but still. And then when I went to Jawaharlapura as a senior lecturer or something, it was a bit lower down the scale. And I finally end up as a professor at Sabarkama. So I have this wonderful image of this happening. Right? And the science faculties there started in English and continued in English. The management faculty finally moved to English medium. The arts faculty hasn't done that. And although I think I can say Sabarkama of all the new universities has the best record for employment, I think it was partly because we had the first term was compulsorily in English. And my students used to come and complain to me. And I would say, yes, your first term is going to be very difficult and then the rest of your lives are going to be easy. I can do your first term in Sinhala and your first term will be very easy and then the rest of your life will be very difficult. And students weren't going to buy that from me, but they did accept my argument of fairness. We had Sinhala and Tamil students. I said, I can do your first term in Sinhala, but the Tamil students, we don't have to do it in Tamil. So they will have to do it in English. Don't you think that's unfair? And students understand unfairness. I said, you do it in Sinhala, these Tamil kids have to do it in English. But ultimately they'll get the jobs and you won't. So finally they all agreed and we did the first term in English, but after I've left, that's also declining. So you have this type of situation where partly because the lecturers themselves were stuck in that mindset of 20 years ago, which is that we can manage perfectly well with Sinhala and Tamil. We don't need English for the world at large. And although the new generation, and I'm not talking only of you, I'm talking of the sheer enthusiasm for English that we get in our rural schools, although the young people really understand and appreciate it, it's not really getting through to the teaching generation or even the lecturing generation at universities. So that is one of the biggest problems, and one of the only things I can tell you is if you want a career that means anything in the world at large now, you do need your English. And this is true not only of Sri Lanka, but true of almost any country in the world except perhaps China, because they also have a very large bank of Chinese, but they also are learning English. Now, let me give you a few more factors that I think you need for the areas that I'm talking about. I think I've given, or the people in charge gave you a list of 6 or so topics: international relations, human rights, education. What were the others? Can you remember? And it's not important. We're talking about life in general. But this also applies, and let me now be very clear, even to those of you who are scientists, that in order for your career enhancement, you will need a certain set of other skills as well. One of them is this word I use called networking. How to work with other people. How do you train for that? Do you all do any subjects in school that you think might relate to training for doing better in the world of work? And what are the subjects you do that will give you this basic training? Are all your subjects only about knowledge? Obviously not. No? No idea? Did you do something called life skills? Was it important and interesting or not? Boring. Yeah. We tried to change the syllabus, but we failed because the NIE wasn't very fond of changing syllabuses. Anything else? Do you all do project work in your various subjects? Do you do it together or separately? Do you find that useful? It should be useful if it's properly done because it develops what's called synergy, people learning to work together, to respect each other's skills, to understand each other's weaknesses, and to build up together a team that can cover for each other. I mean, that's the whole purpose of project work. It's not properly done in many areas, but the whole point of it is to really get you to working as a team. And within that framework, you will also find things like leadership qualities developing. Unfortunately, we don't tend to stress those aspects enough. Okay, what are the other subjects that you need for leadership? Do you do things like problem solving in schools? It's a very simple thing. I mean, it is what perhaps mathematics should teach you to begin with, but it also helps you to think in systematically and logically. Okay, let me just give you a quick problem and tell me what the answer is. I'm not sure that I can do it here. I should have actually brought something along with me. Okay, let me give you the following figures and tell me what comes next. 1, just write them down. 1, 1, 2, 6, 24. What comes next? 1, 1, 2, 6, 24. Come on. That's easy. 1, 1, 2, 6, 24. What comes next? Yeah, good. Do you all understand why? Why? Come on. Why? I won't ask you because you obviously know right. Let's ask someone else. He's given me the right answer. 1, 1, 2, 6, 24, 120.
1 into 1, and then 1 into 2, then to 6 into 3, and
2 into 3,
2 into 3,
6 into 4.
6 into 4, and 10 to 25.
Right. Very simple, huh? So how did you get that answer? Did you all understand that? Now, it's a very simple problem solving exercise. How do you do it? You first look at the pattern. But I met students afterwards who said when they went to apply for jobs, these are the types of tests they were given. Do you do that in your company by any chance? Do you give them thinking exercises if you give them, no, those are the basics. But in some firms now, they also give them these lateral thinking skills because it's called lateral thinking, where you use your mind to solve a problem. And there are very simple rules of thinking. Okay? One is you work out what the pattern is and apply it for the future. Okay? I wish I had brought some more of them to give you. But I think the point I'm trying to make here is that especially in the fields I'm talking about, and this applies also to management, you need to be absolutely sure that you're thinking outside the box. Now, in one sense, if you are working in ordinary engineering, ordinary medicine, you can follow the rules pretty well. But the sort of person who Dr. Ananda was talking about just now, people like Brunel were able to think outside the box and decide on certain patterns that hadn't been done before. You can build a bridge just like people have built a bridge before you. And on the whole, 99% of engineers will have a very good life doing that. It's only if you want to be that 1% that you have to think outside the box. But in areas like diplomacy, in areas like management, in business, you have to think outside the box all the time because the rules are not as steady. And why are the rules not as steady? Because you're dealing with other human beings. No? Materials will follow the same pattern all the way. So if you understand the physical